What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of We Run This. I am Chris Laminati. He is Nick Domingo. Nick, what's up, brother?
Just hanging in there, man. Getting through the week. You know, it's still January. Feels like April. But I had a coffee shop conversation today with the barista being like, oh, shit, it's literally the second week of January. Like, it feels like it should be midsummer already.
And speaking of that, when we post this, it'll probably be almost near the end of January, and you will still have your Christmas tree up in the video.
I will. Trust me. I knew that you were going to ask about it. And it's a conversation that my fiance and I have had where I'm like, we're not keeping this thing up later than this weekend. So it's coming down this weekend, but we are really, really, really soaking up the holiday spirit in this household, bro.
I was hoping, was I part of the conversation? Were you like, Chris is going to bust my balls if that tree's still up?
I should have, and the thing would have been down before we recorded this. I guarantee you. I'd be like, no, we can't embarrass me.
I was hoping I was part of your like nighttime conversation. Like, look, we got to take the tree down. Chris is going to say something on the podcast.
Yeah, I was like, it's right here over my shoulder. Everyone's going to see me like, yo, like it's closer to like Valentine's Day, it feels like, than Christmas. So like time to take down.
Well, you know, I always have to pick out something on the show, especially to try to get people who listen to the podcast to kind of go to watch the video on YouTube to kind of see what we're talking about. So go.
Well, besides our handsome faces.
Yes.
Right?
And besides that, I want people to go from the podcast over to the YouTube to kind of see what we're talking about, especially because today we're talking to Jason Hardrath, who is I love this term, an adventure runner. I feel like every run I go on is an adventure because I don't know what's going to happen in the middle of it or the end of it. But this guy's legitimately an adventure runner where he goes out to these crazy mountain peaks and just he does the things that I'm kind of nervous to do. Yeah.
I mean, certified badass, like not only what he does now, but obviously his story that he talked about in the podcast of getting into a car accident. I think he said 2015.
Yeah.
And bouncing back from that. And what I found interesting, is the way that he pushed himself to continue to get better in the hobbies and interests that he had. Because as I related it to, a great athlete bounces back for their legacy. He doesn't have a legacy that people are like following. This is really for his own self-enjoyment and the fact that he's continued to push himself to get to have these, fastest known times on these different routes is awesome. It's so cool to hear his story.
So one of the things that he touched on when he was talking about being in the car accident, and it was a horrific accident, and like actually on his website, it said that he shouldn't have been able to walk afterwards. But one of the things I want to touch on, we only had a limited amount of time with him because he is a school teacher and he was getting ready for another class to come running in. But he mentioned that so after it happened and he met with the doctor, he told the doctor that he was a triathlete and did all of these things, when he wasn't a teacher. And the doctor said to him, well, you can forget all that stuff. And it made me think sometimes I wonder if doctors and people in that situation, they know that this person is an athlete. And when someone says that to them, it's almost like a reverse psychology thing where they say to them, oh, well, you'll never do that again, meaning the person will push themselves harder to do that. I wonder, is that a technique? I guess we'd have to ask a doctor or someone in that situation, like, because I can't see a doctor ever saying to someone, don't try to rehab yourself.
Exactly. Right. Like if you enjoy doing this, like to hear a doctor say you're not going to be able to do this again, or most likely will not be able to do this again. I mean, if you know that as a doctor, the person's going to walk again, he or she may not be able to do it at the same performance level, but whether you're an athlete or not, it's like, if I can walk, I'll be able to finish a marathon. I mean, I don't care that I'm not going to be able to do it in 3.5 hours, but I may be able to do it in 8 hours. And if that's the goal that you're working towards, I mean, to hear a doctor say that, you might be right. I mean, it could be reverse psychology. Be like, don't give up on that. Push yourself.
Sometimes I wonder if it's a reverse psychology thing. Because I've heard that story numerous times from, athletes of different levels where a person was like, no, you're not going to do that again. When knowing they're going to go do that again.
Yeah, I mean, do you remember when like a torn ACL meant that athlete's career was over? Like this was
Yeah.
like 30 years ago, and
Yeah.
now guys are coming back, and within 9 months, not only performing on a high level, especially on the professional ranks, but then also becoming, Pro Bowlers in the NFL or All Stars in baseball or basketball, and then getting like a second big contract. It's not like a torn ACL is the end of your career anymore. So
Right.
it's interesting to hear him say that he used that as motivation, because I think to be great, you kind of have to, as I told him, create this chip on your shoulder to push yourself to do things, even if you have to test your own limits. And
Yeah.
so if he's comfortable with it and there's even a little bit of pain and it's not doing damage, I mean, sorry, doc, like I'm going to do it. So it's cool to hear him say that he did.
Yeah. And he's testing himself by doing 100 fastest known times, not just like 20 or 50. Not 50 would be even crazy. 100.
Yeah.
Let's just go 100.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like to think that you're going to go do 100 rounds. Like, I don't know. Do you struggle with like trying to run more than like 2 or 3 routes around your house? Like for him to be able to find 100.
I've run out of places. Yeah. Like I can't.
Like that he's found 100 that he's like, I'm going to go do, and I'm going to try and like conquer every single one of these.
Yeah.
That's crazy shit, man.
Yeah. I don't even know if I could, like around my neighborhood and stuff, I don't even think I could come up with 100 different routes. I feel like I would do the same route at least. And then, yeah, he's out there doing 100 different ones in insane circumstances. So, I mean, he's a fascinating guy. He's a motivational guy. And I had a great time talking to him.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's jump into it. And you guys, here's Jason Hardrath, right? Is how you say his name. And
it is. We always have these hard names. We never have like Joe Smith on or like
you guys are
Dana Johnson.
Yeah, Dana Johnson.
Actually, Natalie Johnson was the easiest one we've had.
Exactly. So hit us up. We want you guys on so we don't botch up names. But
yes,
here's Jason Hardrath. Listen to some of the stuff he has to say. And
what's up, everybody? We're back, and we're here with Jason Hardrath. Jason, what's up, my friend?
Hey, it's good to be here. I'm excited.
Jason, you are in school right now. You are a teacher, and are we in your classroom?
We are inside the gym, yeah.
Oh, nice. I don't think gym is like the way it was when we were kids. Is it the same anymore?
I mean, it depends. I'm not sure what kind of gym class you had, but
I feel like
get this to flip around.
As a kid, like I feel like the gym teachers put in minimal effort. Yeah, and they would just like throw a ball in the middle of all of us and be like, "Go do this," and then just watch us for 45 minutes.
I've got a rock wall where I teach them some rope skills and climbing skills. I have these skateboards down here.
Oh, we had nothing.
That's the most badass I've ever seen right there. We didn't have that stuff.
You have like Rob Dyrdek's Fantasy Factory in your gym, and I had like a half deflated kickball that we would all throw at each other.
It's pretty sweet. I enjoy it too because I'm basically a big kid. Mm-hmm. I like to think of myself as just the cool kid who has all the fun games to play and all the cool toys. And it makes me smile a lot.
I could see why. You're surrounded by like toys and I'm surrounded by 50,000 tabs on my computer each day. So you're winning in this situation, bro.
So, I can't complain at all.
How hard is it? So I know you have young kids that you teach. How hard is it to kind of control them and rein them in? Like when they walk in, there's a rock wall and do they get used to it after a while? Like they're not running all over things?
I would say one of my strong suits is understanding that we as human beings have natural urges. Like, of course, when you walk in the room and you see a rock wall, you want to climb that rock wall or you want to ride a skateboard. Or you like, even as adults, we have this desire to go explore or do these big efforts. I mean, we understand human beings aren't blank slates. And so when kids come into my room, I'm very good at channeling those urges into the things I want them doing and sort of making them think it's what they want. Because it is kind of, right? I want to create that adventure. I want to create that fun, that play, that learning. And so when you look at it that way, I find you avoid a lot of the like power struggles where you're trying to stop the kid from doing the thing really want to do. It's like, no, we're gonna do it, but we're gonna do it this way. So yeah, I would say one of the most impressive things about my teaching is my ability. I use the word freeze. I just say the word freeze, and the room can go from just being raging chaos to I could drop a pin and you'd hear it hit the ground.
That's some serious power, dude. That is like some
It's pretty rad.
Influence.
It's pretty rad. It takes a long time to establish that kind of a culture where they're totally bought in, and you have to be like really committed to actually delivering, like creating that fun, because that's basically how I like loop the system. Is I'm like, hey, the faster you guys freeze, the quicker I can tell you what awesome thing we're doing next, and the faster we get to play more. And which is better, playing more or playing less? And they're like, well, playing more. Well, freeze faster. And they're like, all right, we're in. We're bought in.
Were you the kid who would run in and go and grab something, or were you the kid that would kind of wait it out?
It depended on how comfortable I was, because I was both shy and ADHD. So if I felt scared, I would probably just kind of like hang out in the corner away from everybody. But if it was a place I felt safe as a kid, I would constantly touch all sorts of things I wasn't supposed to. Yeah, I was an.
Sounds like me with candy. Like I just, I'm not supposed to touch candy, and I just, I'm like, hey, when I get scared, what I'm going to do? Eat a bag of Butterfingers or something. So your outlet was more, I think, healthy than mine.
I mean, I'm not going to judge, but you said it.
Exactly.
So Jason, you're our first, we've had a bunch of different types of runners. You're our first adventure runner is what you're kind of billed as. So we'll talk us through what's I think Nick and I think we know what it means, but what's an adventure runner?
So, I mean, basically a simple way of thinking of it is taking the fitness that you would normally apply to running a race as fast as you can in sort of a controlled environment. You could think of a race like, what are you paying a race director for? Why do you pay them? Well, they're handling all the logistics, they're mapping your course, they're making sure there's food and water. So all of that sort of taken off the table where you don't have to worry about it, and you just show up and do a strict display of fitness. And adventure running is kind of the opposite of that, where you're going to take that fitness and you're going to combine it with a multitude of other skills, doing your own route finding, doing your own research ahead of time to scout for trails or mountain routes or rock climbing routes, depending on what skill set you want to use. And then you utilize the fitness of the running to get through these different beautiful spaces faster and further than most people would be able to, say, with a heavy backpack on their back.
Where's that love for adventure come from? I mean, were you always kind of an outdoorsy kind of guy, or what pushed you to try this type of running as opposed to just, going outside and running on the road?
So, I mean, I've been through all sorts of iterations of my own running. I started off as just a, track kid, way back in middle school and high school. Kind of got a taste for it there. Even earlier than that, my parents were kind of like hunting, fishing, motorcycling. So we were like getting in the outdoors, not to be physically active, but like getting in the outdoors to do these motorsports or this hunting. So it felt normal to go out to remote spaces from a young age. And then I got into the running. And so that's kind of where the apple fell farther from the tree, and that no one else in my family does fitness stuff. But then it became natural to sort of apply that fitness into going into these outdoor spaces with trail running and things of that nature. And then I had a big car accident that put my running on a pause. So I started climbing more hills, and hills led to mountains. Mountains led to bigger mountains. Pretty soon I was getting into terrain where I needed rock climbing skills. So I started to accumulate rope skills and rock climbing skills and glacier travel skills. And then as the running came back after the recovering, it became natural to blend the two.
You said you were
Go ahead, Chris. Yeah, you're going to ask my next question.
Yeah, you said you were in a bad car accident, and that was in 2015, and you said you basically had to reset your life. Like, walk us through that.
Yeah, so basically 2014, perhaps was the best year of my running and racing. I was a triathlete at the time, so I qualified for 2 Ironman 70.3 World Championships, both for the 2014 year and the 2015 year. I won a local multi-stage cycling race, actually back in my hometown of Baker City, Oregon. First person to grow up in Baker City, whoever came back and won any division of it. So like had this amazing sort of like storybook year in 2014. And kind of the big goal was I wanted to be ready to try to qualify for KONA, the full Ironman World Championship, in 2015. And so basically on the first Sunday of May, I forget what the exact date was, I went out for like a 142-mile bike ride, and like was in such good shape that basically it felt like just a casual ride. Got off and went for a run afterwards, and my body was like, whatever, just sort of feeling like, holy crap, like I'm really fit right now. And it's only May. And then that Tuesday, rolled my car over, got ejected out the window, ended up with 2 fractures in my shoulder, 9 broken ribs, a collapsed lung, and completely shredded the LCL and ACL of my right knee, and had to have that surgically put back together. So yeah, kind of went from this feeling of invincibility to just complete hard reset to everything I'd worked for up to that point.
So that kind of, I mean, first of all, kudos on working yourself back, because having to go through that had to be, forget physically, but mentally draining on you, which leads to that next question, obviously, is whenever you get hit with perseverance, I mean, no matter what circumstance it is, there's always 2 routes, right? You get to a fork in the road. So you take a left and you go down and say, you know what, I'm going to give up. This is my new life. I'm accepting this. This is who I am, and become whatever your next life would be, so to speak. Or you double down and you say, you know what, fuck this. Like, I'm going to overcome this. I'm going to work my way back to become what I had always set out to be. So what made you kind of go down that second path and say, you know what, I'm going to double down and get back into fitness, and not just say, I'm going to feel sorry for myself and just accept the fact I can't do these other things anymore?
Well, I mean, that's an incredibly complex question for me. I mean, it relates back to being a kid who couldn't sit still, being, the ADHD little kid, like just sitting still, like giving up and not being active anymore. Like even, at age 25 when this happened, and even earlier, I understood like to live that lifestyle is to guarantee myself problems with depression and problems with, alcohol misuse and problems of that nature. Like it would not be good for my psyche to just stop moving. So that's a portion of it. There's also just this like powerful drive in me to go out and accomplish, and this drive to, I think because I discovered moving my body at such a young age, it's very almost connected, not so much to my identity anymore, but it's almost a way I perceive value and create value and meaning in my own life. It's a medium that I can use. It feels like, a paintbrush that I've painted with for many, many years, where I understand the strokes of it very well. And so in the moment, like one of the first doctors that I saw after the accident, I brought up, because I'm this passionate young person. One of the first things I bring up is it's like, oh, I'm very into triathlon. I'm very into like running marathons and these races. And the doctor just kind of flatly was like, you're probably gonna have to let that part of your life go. And I remember having this moment where like my spirit sort of sank, and then in the very next instant, this sort of rebellious spirit, like, you don't know who I am. And I think what that ties back to is that a huge driving force of my mentality that pushed me to sort of seek out bigger and bigger goals is that, this process of growth and mastery has always been very personal for me. And there's sort of this self-concept tied to it where I don't view myself as great at anything. I'm sort of the perpetual underdog. Like there's this belief that it's like, if I'm going to do anything worthy, anything of note, I have to be working twice as much as anyone else. And so I was like one of the only kids in my high school who trained year round for his sport. Like that wasn't a normal cultural thing in my high school, but I was out doing it to prepare to try to make it to college as a runner.
But not, what's interesting is that, this doctor tells you that you feel down in the dumps, and then you get this kind of inner drive. One of our former guests, Gab Bolin, I said to her, she kind of created this chip on her own shoulder to push herself. I think all of us, Chris can probably relate. We all have this chip on our shoulder, but it's so interesting to hear you say and talk about your experience, because you're not like a pro athlete. If this happens to, a LeBron James, if it happens to Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson, being drafted late, like they can use that as motivation, be like, I'm going to shut up every hater, every doubter on such a big stage, and it leads into their profession and success. With you, yours was literally like, it's a hobby. Like this isn't your profession. And so I think that's what I'm so interested and intrigued by, is that like, you didn't have to do this. Like you wanted to do this. So I guess like I get that you're kind of dancing around and saying the right thing, but like, where does that really, really come from? Like, it can't just be because you're a kid who liked to, jump around. Like what was the driving factor of you wanting to get back and doing these things again?
So, I mean, like I said, it is complex. And I think another layer of it that's really essential is from a very young age. I forget exactly. Well, I remember one of the books. It's called A Million Miles in 1,000 Years. And it proposes living like, it begs the question, if certain elements make a great story in a book or in a movie, then why don't those elements also apply in our own lives? And so sort of this applying the elements of great story to our own life was something that impacted me from a very young age. And I started to look at my own life like, what is it I actually care to do? Like, what is it I want to live my life for? And so that sort of flips your thinking when you're a young person from a culture that inculcates us to be extrinsically motivated. It wants us to focus on that next raise we're going to get, that next job we're going to get, that next paycheck we're going to get. Why do you do your homework? To get a grade. Not because you want to learn, not because you love the content. You do it to get something, right? That's sort of put into our minds from a very young age. But when you flip the thinking and you look at your own life through like the story you care to like live and leave behind, both for yourself and for others, like that's all about, what do I care about? It's not about what I get out of it. It's about what do I care to put into it? And so I think I was thinking from that frame of mind from a very young age, and that changes how you would approach something like this. It's like, I'm not just wanting to get to a minimum to get a paycheck. I want to push myself to do anything I dream of or care of doing where I can finish my life and be proud of myself. To some degree, to arrive at a place where you feel like you are your own hero. And I think that's been a driving force in my own life, to hold myself to that my own kind of standard in that regard. A standard that impresses me and, by secondary nature of it, impresses others around me. The idea of just settling and sort of waking up 30 years later and being like, well, I guess I'm retiring now. That sort of idea just sounds hideous and awful to me.
Let me ask this. Life is all about opposition, and you went through a giant, life-changing moment when you got into a car accident. A lot of times things like that, people don't start working out or do any of these things because they're inside their own head a lot. So you had to get outside your head to decide to do all this. What suggestions would you give to people who they're so inside their head that they talk themselves out of doing just about everything?
That's a great question. I mean, self-talk and like personal narrative is so powerful. And I find so often people do create self-limiting beliefs where they believe certain things about themselves or certain things about the world or certain things about how others will look at them or react to them. And you just look and it's like they all pile in this specific direction to like demotivate action, to stop action. And I guess I've over time held a pretty hard standard toward myself of avoiding self-limiting belief. Like the moment I notice it, it's like I have to go the opposite direction. But I guess as far as getting out of your own head, I think, you know, you look back on like Stoic philosophy and other philosophers, you know, there's a lot of this sort of talk about what one might refer to as like meta thinking, you know, sort of like getting outside yourself and taking on that third person perspective. So even if you're feeling an emotion, you know, you're feeling powerless, you're feeling fear, you sort of step outside of yourself and you go, okay, I notice I'm feeling fear in this moment. That's okay. Okay, I feel fear. What do I still care to see my character do as I'm feeling this, right? So almost seeing yourself in that moment, playing out the moment. And I think practices like that give us some power. Because normally I say when you experience an emotion, you completely lose yourself to the emotion. Like when you're angry, you're just angry and you're acting like an angry person, as opposed to you feel the anger, you notice yourself feeling anger, and then you go, who do I care to be in this moment? What do I care to do with this emotion? And then that gives you that pause and thinking to sort of direct that next step, that next action in a more intentional way, as opposed to just sort of a habitual reactive way. And I think that can be a pretty powerful tool to start instilling that as a mental and emotional habit.
Does that kind of go along with your online bio saying see opportunity in opposition? Is that sort of that same mentality and related to that?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, you out of Stoic philosophy, again, I mean, the obstacle is the way is like a common phrase. It's the title of Ryan Holiday's book, who's kind of a current voice on that. And I mean, the way I phrased it before, even hearing reading anything about Stoic philosophy was, I would say discomfort is the path. Like when something is uncomfortable, that's a sign that you're going in the right direction. Like nothing's going to feel great when you first start off in a direction. For example, after doing endurance sports, and I guess tying back to sort of my family roots, I'm born to a family that's kind of heavier set, bigger built, bigger body, shorter legs, like not built to be a runner. And so all throughout my life, if I think about weights for too long, I put on too much muscle to be useful in the backcountry. So I all of my running career, when I was pursuing these track races and these road races, I just like wouldn't do any lifting to try to stay as light as possible. And even still, I remember my first season on my college team, the distance coach walking by, seeing me standing next to all the other distance runners, and looks down at my legs and goes, "You standing in the right spot?" It's just like, yeah, okay, I get it. I'm not built right. Lost my train of thought there. What was the question?
Well, I guess what you're saying is, embracing that uncomfortable feeling. And I guess when you get in that mindset, how do you run with it? Because there's a lot of people who have these ideas that, going back to one of your previous answers, like they get this idea that they're limited and they're not able to accomplish other things that people are. But I think there's that gray area. You're in this high, you're in this low, and then you're in this middle area. And when you're on the high, it's because you're comfortable. When you're in the low, you're kind of like just kind of going with the path. And then you get in that uncomfortable feeling in the gray middle area. And you can, again, choose which way you want to go. And for you, what makes you push yourself to say, all right, embrace this feeling and run with it? Like, learn what to do with this feeling so that, like, you're on a bike for the first couple of times and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to fall. I know I'm going to fall. It's uncomfortable. until you don't fall anymore. And then you're like, all right, I've conquered this. So describe your mindset there.
So I guess I would answer that in a few ways. The first one is, I think kindergartners are a wonderful teacher in that you can hand a kindergartner a basketball and they will shoot and wildly miss over and over and over and over and over and over with no loss of enthusiasm for hours without any self-judgment. They never go, oh, I suck at this, right? And us adults, we're the opposite. We take 2 shots and we're like, well, this must not be for me. I'm no good. Like, I tried it and I'm done. I clearly not cut out for that. It's like, well, wait a minute. I mean, the only reason we ever become good at something as a kid is precisely because we'll sit there and play at it, not noticing that we're actually practicing. We will play at it for hours and hours and hours, day after day after day after day. So I actually remember where I was going with noting that I didn't lift weights, is my upper body got really weak. And so I made this transition to rock climbing that I mentioned because I was getting out into these more and more extreme spaces and I needed that skill set. Well, I go into the rock gym and I am literally the worst period climber there. And I'd come from this place of being a really good triathlete, like performing really well in each of the sports. Like, I'd gotten used to that. Like, when I do a thing, I do it well. And going from that to being literally the worst one in the whole gym and having to sort of sit with that feeling of, when someone else is like, oh yeah, you just grab that easy hold and then put your foot up there and then you just send it. And it's like, I can't even grab that first hold you mentioned. Like, I'm not strong enough to pull on something that small. And just having to like that desire to quit and that desire to sort of escape that uncomfortable space where I had to try very hard and still suck compared to everybody else. Luckily, I was aware because I have this reference point of like seeing kids play and all that. So I was like, nope, stop, suspend that judgment of self, just play with it. You're just here playing. And just like reminding myself to just goof off, have a good time, climb what I could, try to push myself and embrace challenge, but on my own level, not comparing myself to someone else or what anyone else was able to do. And then just going through that process and trusting the process that I know leads to growth over time. And so continuing to practice in ways that I knew would lead to good outcomes with climbing strength and climbing ability, working on footwork, working on finger strength, working on arm strength, working on endurance. And then I can remember like about a year and a half later, after going through this process and just like tuning out and that self-judgment, I can remember the first day I was in there climbing around, doing my thing, looking for the next challenge I wanted to do. And someone goes, man, how do you do this? Like looking to me as the person who's good in the gym and like wanting to learn from me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I've arrived back at this place where I'm now like good enough at what I'm doing that others notice and want to learn from me. And I think that's probably, as far as to circle back to the like, getting out of your own head question as well, like that's a huge part of it. Is so often we want to judge ourselves way too soon. We want to pass a swift judgment and then be able to be done with something. It's like, yeah, sometimes to say you truly tried something means you need to go out and spend a year or two on it. Like, it's not always like well, I went for one run and I didn't like it, so I don't think I like running. It's like, well, you haven't really tried it then. At least that's my opinion.
So speaking of challenging yourself and other people challenging themselves, right now you're in the middle, you're on a journey to the 100 fastest known times. What are the fastest known times and why are you trying 100 of them?
So I kind of arrived at this interesting place in 2018 where my running was coming back after the car accident finally. So I was actually able to, I can't run fast like I used to before the car accident, but I got back to where I could run long distances and it wouldn't like swell up like a grapefruit. So the natural thing was to be like, well, I guess I'll go do like big runs between peaks I want to climb and just do these big link ups. So I was already doing that stuff with a buddy and we were out just having fun. And then I discovered FKTs, fastest known times, which basically, the basic way to sum them up is it's sort of a course. If someone's on like Strava, they might know about Strava segments. So it's kind of similar to that, except it's more curated with like big classic routes that other people want to do and repeat. And they can be old famous lines or named trail systems or ascents of peaks. So there's a lot of this variety of how they can be done and what they can be, and what kind of terrain you can move on. So they're almost like a virtual race in that sense, but they're virtual races that you can do on your own time. You can like watch the conditions and pick the ideal day, and you just track it with your GPS watch and taking, geo-stamped photos on your phone to prove that you actually did what you say you did. And yeah, you race to set the fastest known time on that given route. And so you're able to do these virtual races, if you will, in places that could never host a race, on the side of a rock face, free soloing up a 5 pitches of 5-6 or something, where it's like no race director could ever put people out on that. But with the fastest known time, if that's the kind of thing you're into, go for it. So I fell in love with that freedom to create and that freedom to find amazing lines, and just the diversity of skills necessary to complete some of these routes where you're mixing running and rock climbing, or running and glacier travel, moving at high elevations. Some of my favorite ones have been multi-sport efforts too, because of my background in triathlon. So biking and swimming, and then climbing a mountain that has technical aspects. So yeah, it became natural to be like, oh, this is a great fit for me. I have fitness. I have this background in fitness and in training. I have these skill sets for moving alone in these really remote spaces. So let's go out and just start tackling these. And I think also the reason, like, if you ask the question like, well, why do so many of them? I guess the thought there is, I've never been much of I just want to do one single race this year and have it be perfect. I've never much been that person. Like the ADHD kid in me is like, let's just go on more adventures. And so choosing let's do 100 of them, to me, it's like, oh, that means if I succeed, I'll have done 100 awesome, memorable, amazing experiences where I pushed myself to my very best in beautiful spaces. And it just became kind of obvious that I was suited to that and that kind of pursuit.
What's harder for you, doing the triathlon or doing, these fastest known times up a mountain? Because it sounds like it'd be the latter, which is weird to say.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose with the controlled environment of like a race course, you are able to dial it out a little bit more on like a pure just physical output, like how many watts are you putting out at any given moment. But as far as what's harder for the experience, like if you calculate the whole thing, by far these FKTs, by far, just because you're out there dealing with your own emotions, dealing with fatigue and sleep deprivation, dealing with, all the normal things that would happen in a race, plus, the logistics and the route finding. Yeah, definitely a higher level of perception, of perceived effort rather, with FKTs.
Let's say tomorrow, Nick or I wanted to go out and become an adventure runner or try one of these. Do you suggest mapping it out and doing it on our own, running with someone who's done it before? Like, what's the best next step?
It totally depends on what style, because one thing with FKTs is there's unsupported style where you go strictly like alone, carrying all your stuff from start to finish. There's self-supported where you can like drop different stashes along the way of your route, and then pick them up as you go. Or they're supported, which means you could have people be your pacer during certain portions and a crew that would meet you. So it would feel more like a race. And so depending on what style you want would kind of determine some of the answer to your question. But as far as how to plan for it, I mean, you can pick an established route, get on fastestknowntime.com, go surfing through the routes in your area or in a place you're going to travel to. And if one sort of suits your fancy, whether it's like, oh, that trail sounds amazing, or I wonder if I could beat that ascent time up that mountain. Number one, you want to know the route really well. You want to make sure you've done your research, that you're not going to run into a situation you're not prepared for. So, for example, making sure there's no report of it having like technical rock climbing aspects if you're not prepared to be a technical rock climber without a rope. You want to do your research on the route and know it really well. You want to have a GPX file of the route loaded into either your phone or your watch, if your watch is capable of it, so that you can stay on route, because there aren't any flags out there. And sometimes even trail routes can have confusing turns that you can end up going the wrong way on. So you want to do your research in that way. Having some form of a emergency device like a spot tracker, where if something goes wrong, you have a way of contacting people, especially if you know you're going to be running through an area with no cell phone reception. That's a key piece of equipment to have. And then all of your normal essentials for if you're going to go on a hike out in the backcountry. You want a first aid kit with you. You want some of those basics like self-preservation things, especially if it's your first experience out there and you haven't been able to run very many experiments with how you handle being out there alone and how you handle whatever conditions you might face. You kind of want to be a little over prepared rather than the opposite, because that can lead to a really negative experience trying to go out and have an adventure run. If you don't bring enough warmth layers and you ascend up into the high country and end up with nerve damage in your fingertips because your hands got too cold, that's not a great way to have a positive experience that motivates you to go again.
No.
Have you tried to ever take any of the kids on one of these adventure running field trips, with you? Like, have you tried to push them to get into it a little bit?
I have. I used to teach K through 12 because I'm at a small rural school. So I used to teach all the grade levels. And back when I was still doing that, I would connect with kids as they were going through middle school and early high school. And if they were into it, I would take them to little local races, and a few of them ran up some local peaks with me. And actually what's funny is, again, way after the fact, because that was back in 2014 or 2015, way after the fact, I found out that someone had submitted one of those local mountains as an FKT route. And I went and looked, and actually the time that the kids had produced up that mountain peak was still the fastest time. Nice. So I went and submitted, our GPS data so that they could have an FKT for that effort they did when they were, middle schoolers. That was kind of a fun thing to send them an email, because they've graduated now, and be like, hey, guess what, guys? So yeah, that was fun.
Awesome.
Nice.
So you're going to be going to pick up those little kindergartners in a couple minutes. So before we let you go, where can people find out more about you online?
Probably the easiest way to connect with me is through social media. Instagram is probably the thing I'm on the most, and that's just Jason Hardrath is my tag there. Same thing, easy to find on Facebook, Jason Hardrath. I'm pretty sure I'm still the only one that pops up for most searches in most locations. And then I have a website, jasonhardrath.com. Still kind of building that, so not a lot on there yet. And then I'm on LinkedIn as well.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, dude, we really appreciate it. It's such an interesting story to hear, not only your mentality on certain things, but obviously how you came back and bounced back after that awful car accident you were in. And always inspiring to hear somebody who continues to push themselves and then can influence others. So thank you, honestly, for coming on.
It's been a pleasure, guys. I wish we had more time. It was a good chat.
Yeah, we'll have you on again next time when when you have a little bit more time.
For sure. That would be awesome.
Maybe
I would enjoy going a little deeper.
Maybe right in the middle of a class.
That would be fun.
Thanks, Jason.
Bye.
And that brings another episode of We Run This to a close. Nick and I want to thank everybody for listening. If you love the podcast, please share it with friends or leave a review on iTunes. And remember to follow Nick and I on social media. He's at It's Nick Domingo, and I'm at Chris Illuminati on Twitter. Or follow us both on Instagram at WeRunThis_pod. Until next time, see everybody out there.